Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to the second of our Extraordinary Impact Speaker Series. I'm Sujata Raman, Regional Managing Director for Abercrombie & Kent. Thank you all for joining us. Well, it's certainly been a different year for all of us. At A&K, we've spent the last few months considering what travel will look like in the coming weeks and months ahead. We're fortunate to have been selling domestic holidays for over 15 years now, and our suite of journeys in Australia and New Zealand have been refined and expanded in light of the current circumstances. Our website now has over 40 private itineraries and holiday suggestions through Australia and New Zealand. Most exciting is our Kimberley Luxury Expedition Cruise, which we have just relaunched. It was in fact sold out to international guests, but the current circumstances may well work in our favor, as we have been able to open up some inventory at a dramatically improved price. This is an exclusive A&K charter on an all-balcony mega yacht, starting in Broome on the 6th of May and ending 13 days later in Darwin. Each day includes Zodiac excursions accompanied by experienced expedition staff with experts. We're fortunate to have people of the caliber of Bart Pigram, a Yawaru man, who shares his passion and his experience in the region. Sites include such remarkable wonders as the Lacapede Islands, a jet boat tour to the extraordinary horizontal falls, and a unique low tide experience at Montgomery Reef. The cruise is inclusive of helicopter touring, a scenic flight over the Bungle Bungles, and some incredible rock art, including the Bradshaw paintings at Jar Island. This is truly a remote and untouched part of Australia, best explored from the water, and it's a wonderful opportunity to explore the Kimberley. We have a limited time offer that is available only until 11 December and represents significant savings on the published pricing. And of course, the Kimberley cruise is backed by our Book with Confidence policy, so you can rest assured that if the cruise does not operate, or if Western Australia does not open its borders as scheduled, your money is secure. You can, of course, use any existing travel credits you may have with A&K to make your booking, and there is a minimal deposit of $1,000. In addition to this wonderful cruise, we have small group journeys, a range of fabulous private homes, private islands, private yachts, sleeping 8 to 10 people, fully crewed, available around Australia, and a range of air safaris as well, private charter aircraft for as few as 8 people traveling together. It's a perfect way to avoid large airports and commercial flights, and it's surprisingly affordable if you're traveling with family and friends. So please do talk to us if you're considering a holiday in Australia and New Zealand. Abercrombie & Kent globally has been accredited by the World Travel and Tourism Council as providing safe travels and recognized by the Australian Tourism Export Council as a COVID-ready business. I'm delighted to announce that we've just been awarded Oceania's Best Tour Operator by the World Travel Awards. And now to tonight's speaker. We're especially grateful to Dr. Lois Peeler, AM, for joining us. I cannot possibly do justice to Dr. Peeler's impressive resume, so I'm going to include an abbreviated introduction. Lois Peeler spent her childhood on orchards in Shepparton East and the Orville districts of the Goulburn Valley after her family moved from the Kamaraganja Aboriginal Reserve near Barma. She has had a varied career, which includes being the first Aboriginal model and the first Aboriginal person to work in television when she was engaged to work on the GTV9 breakfast session in the 60s. Dr. Peeler and her sisters formed a singing group, the Sapphires, which toured Vietnam at the height of the Vietnam War. Her nephew, Aboriginal playwright Tony Briggs, wrote about these experiences in the smash hit, The Sapphires, which was made into a movie and won multiple awards. Lois Peeler has held senior positions over 16 years in the state and federal public service. She is the author of Aboriginal Oral History of the Flats, co-author of the Yorta Yorta Language Heritage. In 2003, Lois Peeler received the Centenary Medal for her work in tourism. In 2014, she was made a member AM in the General Division of the Order of Australia for her significant service to the Indigenous community as an educator, advocate, and role model. As principal of Warrawa Aboriginal College on the outskirts of Melbourne, Dr. Peeler oversees implementation of a holistic education for young Aboriginal women, nurturing Aboriginal culture, history, and identity in an education framework, empowering Aboriginal girls to walk in both worlds. In 2017, Dr. Lois was named the Senior Victorian Australian of the Year and was conferred an honorary doctorate of social science by RMIT. This year, Lois was inducted into the Victorian Women's Honour Roll. Welcome, Auntie Lois. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the history of Aboriginal education in this country and your own involvement with Warrawa and how it all started.
Well, sadly, the history of Aboriginal education is not a very good story. There was a time in our history where Aboriginal children were only allowed to be taught to the grade 3 level because there was the idea that they would be going out and working as servants or farmhands. And so that's how it was. And when this school was thought about, it was really on lived experience because we came from an Aboriginal reserve, my family, as did everybody else in this region. So, you know, there was the desire to provide a rigorous education that had a relevant curriculum and took into account well-being and culture, who we are as First Nations people. And I'll just read to you what was said by Pastor Sir Douglas Nichols, who many of you may have heard of before, and he was the first patron. By the way, the school was started by my late sister Hillis Morris. But what was said was Aboriginal children must be educated in the way of our people. They must learn their history about their great ancestors, the language and the law. It's time for them to know and to understand themselves. They must be educated in the ways of the society in which they live, in the very best of what it has to offer, so they can truly be part of not only of Australia's past, but also its present and its future. And that's kind of the basis of what we do here. We embrace our culture, we celebrate our culture, we tell our history, and we teach that to other people who want to learn about Australia as it was at the time of, I guess, colonisation. And there were issues that came about from dispossession, dislocation, and displacement from traditional lands. So all of that is our story, and I like to tell that story.
Well, perhaps we should just move to the video that you have, which is shot on the grounds of the school, and I think we'll give everyone a sense of place before we move on.
There are mornings in the Yarra Valley and ranges when the sun is slow to rise. It's cold. In gullies, tussock and grass are damp underfoot, and black soil is damp under the tussock. The land is edged with timber, manigum, messmate, and mountain ash. And under this shelter acacia and ferns and an abundance of birds. Bellbirds, the currawong and kookaburra. On these mornings, a wet fog smokes and wraps itself around the forest. Trunk and branch and leaf are coiled and made hidden. And from the forest, the fog stretches itself out over the risings and fallings of land. On these mornings, we at first see only apparitions and vague shapes. On these mornings, at first nothing is certain. What we know is what we remember. What existed before what has been passed to us. But then comes magic. The sun works harder and harder still, and the fog writhes away and made to glow by a golden light, the quality of crystal, clear and sharp. The air is made pure, breathing becomes easy. And the land, the valley floor, the steep slopes, the green of eucalyptus, the ridges far distant, is revealed as an inspiration, a celebration, a sacrament, and a compact that exists between the past and the future. Womenjika, you are invited to step onto the land of the children of the Dreamtime people and explore an authentic Aboriginal cultural experience at Warrawa Aboriginal College, Victoria's only Aboriginal school. Located in the picturesque Yarra Valley at Hillsville, just 90 minutes from the Melbourne CBD, Warrawa is a place of great natural beauty, situated on land of historical and cultural significance, which once formed part of the Corranderk Aboriginal Reserve. Our story is written in the land. Welcoming people to our ancestral lands is a traditional practice of great significance with its foundations in ancient Aboriginal law. Aboriginal law requires clans from other areas to seek the assent of the traditional custodians to enter their land, and in traditional times, a message stick was used to convey messages between the clan leaders. Today, this protocol is reflected in contemporary welcome to country ceremonies. In the land of the Kulin, the welcome to country may include a smoking ceremony, where selected native plants are burnt to create clouds of smoke, and the ritual of walking through the smoke symbolises spiritual cleansing and honours the spirit ancestors Bunjil, the eaglehawk, and Wa, the crow. Like sentinels overlooking the site, a grouping of memorial poles has a prominent place, honouring the 38 tribes of what is now known as Victoria. Following these traditional customs, visitors are led on an interpretive walk through the Dreaming Trail. And here, our Aboriginal guides share knowledge and stories of connection to land and point out traditional use of plants for food, medicine, and craft. A memorial to the children of Corranderk has a place of prominence on an island in the Billabong. An evocative soundscape gives voice to the children of Corranderk, who grew up in the children's asylum and dormitory for orphaned or neglected children. The soundscape explores life on an Aboriginal reserve.
The bell tolled at 8:30 each morning, and in the evening, the sound of the bell called all the residents to attend prayers, twice on Sundays.
From here, you will make your way to the History Walk, which charts the history of Aboriginal struggle and highlights the achievements of 21 Aboriginal leaders and change makers, from activists to academics, artists, performers, sports people, and more. They're individuals who are recognised for making a significant contribution to Aboriginal community development. The experience culminates with a visit to the on-site Aboriginal Resource Centre for light refreshments and an opportunity to yarn with an Aboriginal elder to learn more about Aboriginal people, our history, our culture, and life in contemporary Australia.
That looks absolutely beautiful, Auntie Lois, a lovely serene spot. I think everyone here would be interested to know where the girls come from. Where do your students, do they come from around Australia or only Victoria? Or?
So our students come from Aboriginal communities across the country.
Right.
Many of them are from what we would say remote communities or very remote communities. So they come here because in many of those communities, there is no secondary schooling. And their families choose to send them all the way down to Victoria because we are the only Aboriginal school that caters specifically for young Aboriginal women.
That's quite amazing, isn't it? You're the only Aboriginal school in all of Australia?
Yes, indeed. A boarding
Wow.
school.
Yes, where they can stay. So it must be very challenging for these girls who I imagine, you said they come from remote communities. How do they make that transition to Victoria?
Yeah. I think that the girls are able to make that transition. Not everybody, I'll be honest. Some girls find it a bit difficult, and so. But the ones that do, they really are able to make that successful transition because they have a lot of support to be able to do that. Our school is based on an integrated model of education, so it's academic learning, it's health and well-being, and it's culture. So those three things, they form the basis of what we do.
But you follow the recognized VCAL curriculum, do you? Or
we follow the Australian curriculum, and
right.
Yes, we have introduced the VCAL program for up to year 12.
Right. And how do you choose these girls, or do they choose you? How does that, I mean, there must be so many needy girls.
They choose us.
Yep.
The thing about this school is that the families are means tested, and it's usually based on the remoteness of the community if there's not a secondary school, so they have to leave home to go to school if they wish to do a secondary education. But it might also be about overcrowding in their family situation or other things that makes them eligible. So it's based on home conditions.
And do they apply directly to you, or do you have coordinators in different parts of the country that make recommendations?
They apply directly to the school, and it's quite a lengthy enrolment process because of all of the documentation that's required. And it's based on whether or not their family meets the criteria that's AB study. It's federal funding to support them to come to Melbourne, supports their tuition and their boarding.
What sort of challenges do you think they face being here?
Well, you know what? They're all adolescent young women. There are many challenges, I have to say.
Not unique to your students, I'm sure.
But, I think the challenges are the same as anybody that leaves home at that age. And I think it's about getting into a routine for many of these girls to be feeling safe, to know that they're supported. Being away from home, obviously, is a challenge for just about everybody. So, as soon as they come back, they start saying counting down the weeks till they go home again. But, it's a growth for them. It's learning. And I'm always so, what's the word? I love seeing them make that personal growth to be able to do that, because our philosophy is to teach them to be able to walk in both worlds, to hold on to our Aboriginal culture and our traditions, but be able to navigate their way through the mainstream, which of course we all have to do. So
Tell us a little bit more about that. How do you do that? I mean, I imagine that there are language barriers as well. Because of course you would have them speaking multiple different languages, would that be right?
well, yes, many of them speak up to 3 and 4 different languages, Aboriginal languages, but everybody speaks English. But we encourage the use of language because Indigenous languages are dying out at a rapid pace right across the world, and particularly here in Australia. And we've already lost a number of languages. So, they're welcome to use language, just have to use it with respect. Because they are able to speak so many languages and practice their culture, their dancing. We had a wonderful day last week because it was our National Aboriginal and Islander Day observances, NAIDOC. And so we had a culture day where they were actually cooking their traditional food, dancing, singing and everything. And so they're able to express their identity as Aboriginal people.
Right. Okay. And what would be the sort of modern day Australian living component of it? I mean, when you talked earlier about teaching them to bridge both worlds or walk both worlds, how do you bring in the other side of it?
Well, they do very well at learning how to shop.
Right.
Okay. I think we also have a program called Pathways to Womanhood. So that is a program for young women to help them to make a healthy transition to adulthood. And so it's action-based learning. And I take them out to the local RACV club, for example, where we might have luncheon together. The girls learn their public speaking. They dress appropriately. They learn the things that, will get them into jobs and so forth, that the expectations, I guess, of society, which sometimes they may not get in a very relaxed, remote community that is heavily embedded, where culture is heavily embedded. So they've got that experience, and they take that learning home with them or onto whatever they choose to do. They might want to go on to university, and if they don't, that's all right, because they will go home and take the skills and the ability that they have learned here, take it back to become leaders in their own communities.
Do you find that many of them stay on in somewhere like Melbourne or Sydney or, far from home?
No, home is home.
Right.
They all
yes.
love to go home. But the opportunities are there that if they want to study in Melbourne, and some of them have done in the past, but it's the same thing. They go home at semester break or whatever and come back to do their studies because they don't get the opportunity in their home community. So as I said, they have to leave anyway. But, resilience is something that we teach,
Yes.
building that resilience and being able to cope with all that.
Well, we've all needed a bit of that over the last few months.
Absolutely.
And how has that impacted your school and your girls, the pandemic and the lockdown, and times have been tough for everyone. How has the school and the students dealt with it?
Look, I have to acknowledge the girls. They've been able to adapt really, really well. And there was a time when, I think it was in term 2, where they had just come back, and then we went into complete lockdown in Victoria, and then they had to go home because it was all remote teaching and not face to face. And it's been a very disruptive year for us all, but for our small school, the issue there was about that in the remote communities, the girls, they don't have access to, digital access and all of that. So we provided them with laptops to take home. Then we had to give the USB sticks, and then the teachers were, teaching remotely. It was quite challenging for some, but as I said, I have to acknowledge all of those that stuck with it And then when they were able to come back, you know, and I've got a smaller group on site at the moment. I've got around 30 girls at the moment. And, you know, they're doing really well. So, you know, but they're all looking forward to going home in a couple of weeks. So
That would be. So you said you've got 30 girls at the moment. How many do you usually have when the school is full? What's the number?
Well, we're a very small school. We cater for 70 girls.
Okay.
And because many girls, as I said, coming from remote communities, and because they're means tested, sometimes there might be issues at the family level or at the community level. So they present with quite complex needs. And we have found that we don't want to go any bigger than that, you know, the 70 enrollment, so that we can give full attention and all of those support measures for each and every girl. And so, you know, we'll look at having those come back next year. The census date is always in August for all schools.
Right.
So we're just going to see how it goes at the beginning of the year, and then in August, when census is due, I hope that we will have that, and then they can continue on into the next year. I think, like, I'm sure that Abercrombie and Kent are feeling a bit of uncertainty here, and we have to kind of feel our way as we
all do. Yes.
Forward. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, there's one of the things I'm interested in. I mean, you talked about, you know, pathways to different worlds and walking both worlds and so on. And we've talked a lot about how you try and teach the Aboriginal girls to also live in the modern day Australia. Is there a learning in the other direction as well? Do they have any interaction with other schools? Do other school children from Melbourne, for instance, have an opportunity to meet them and learn about them and their communities?
Well, yes, we take the view that we're not in a fish bowl, right? So our focus is on education of our children. But we have a day during Reconciliation Week where we invite all of the many local schools, partner schools come in. We have up to 20 schools. And what a day that is. It's a wonderful day. It's a day of cultural exchange, sporting exchange, social exchange. We have dance party, and, you know, it's a great day. And so that's a day that we all look forward to. We have Indigenous games, we have football. Oh, it's all women, so, you know, all girls. Then we have, you know, basketball and netball. And so everybody gets a chance to participate. So it's really great.
I imagine that would be a learning experience for everyone involved in something like that. And you talked a little bit about getting federal funding. Is that the primary source of your funding? How do you raise money for this endeavor?
Yes, well, that's why the families are, as I said, means tested to be eligible for what we call AB Study program, and it's like the Australian program. And that's the main source. But we do get loadings for girls that come from remote communities, for example. And I think the girls come with different levels of achievement because they are coming from other schools, you know, primarily government schools. And when they present at Warrawa, they're assessed to see what their level of achievement is. And then we have 4 groups that they go into so that they can, if they're in perhaps a lower group where their English literacy is not very strong, then they have extra support in that, you know. But sometimes too, we do the full health test. Now, in Aboriginal communities, it's common to have ear complaints, otitis media. So quite often, a child might have gone through primary school without that being picked up, that they can't hear what is being said by the teachers. So we do all that health and well-being assessment as well as the academic assessment.
Right. And just talking about academic assessment, one of the questions that has come in is, how do you group girls? Are they grouped by age, as we traditionally would in a school, or is it by ability? And also, do you try and give them some support from their own community? That do some of them come with a sibling or a friend? Sort of two parts to that.
Because we're a boarding school, well, let me start again. As I said, there's an assessment, so it's based on their level of achievement, and age appropriate as well. And if they're older and have probably not a very strong English literacy background, then they're in an age appropriate group, but they have intensive support from student support and the teachers. So there's that. In our boarding school, we have 5 separate cottages. So the girls are carefully, it's identified how they will be housed to make sure that they're in a house that it's diverse and not just one language group, so that they're mixing, they're making new friends. It's a new experience for them. They're learning new things, how to care for themselves. So self-care, we think, is really important as well. And then they have to do their chores. That's a learning as well. But that's how, and then it's wonderful. They all are supportive and they become a little family themselves, And in terms of support from home, they're all got their mobile phones. So we have quite strict rules about when they can, have free phone time. And it's usually in the evening. So they're in constant touch with their families. And when we're in a non-COVID time, families, we call them chaperones, they will bring their child down, settle them for a couple of days and then take off. So they know the school, then the families know the school, and they actually tell us what their aspirations are for their child and what is realistic in their community. And, so that we then develop a personalised learning plan for each and every student. And so it creates their learning journey.
Right, so it's obviously very individualised as well.
It is indeed.
Right, okay. What sort of projects are on the horizon for Warrawa? Where would you like to see this going?
I've always got projects going, but
you look like the kind of person who would.
there's 2 that are going at the moment. So one is the development of our Aboriginal Resource Centre that is there to provide professional development for government, corporate and everything, because in Victoria, we're going through this period now of working towards a treaty with Aboriginal people and also self-determination. So a lot of people don't really know what that means. So there's kind of a bit of, work to do in that space. But the other one that we're doing is creating a multimedia studio for our girls, because we believe in telling our story, whether it's through the arts, performing arts, song, they're writing, they're being encouraged to write, and then they'll be able to record their songs. And then we'll be able to also film. They'll learn how to film and use the equipment, so that hopefully that's something that they can take back home as well. Gather oral histories from their families, or, all of the communities have their own Aboriginal radio stations, so that they can develop the skills to be able to take on those. So it's reporting and all of that. So those are just 2 of my projects at the moment.
Just tacking for a moment, one of the questions that's come through is, do the girls come for the whole of secondary school?
Well, that's obviously our objective, to come in at year 7 and to finish, go through to VCAL. If they want to do a VCE program, then we'll assist them to go and do that. But for many, it's hands-on learning and developing their pathway through, working towards certificates, and then that's how they get their VCAL certificate at the end. And that is our objective. But, you know, it depends on each individual, of course, as everybody else. So we're blessed when they stay with us and that they're able to graduate and, you know, go through all that. It depends on, look, I'll say this, family support is incredibly important, and that makes a difference. So, you know, if a child is from a family that really values education and encourages them to stay and not go home because they're having a fight with their housemate or something like that, that makes a huge difference, you know. But,
and do you generally find that the girls come with support? I mean, it's a big move for them to come from a remote community, isn't it?
Yes. Look, again, that's varied too, because given the fact that the families are means tested, so and many of our families are below the poverty line, and they're on what we call the basics card, which is now going to be rolled out for everybody else. So, you know, I think, and I think you have to consider also that Aboriginal families have not had a history of success in education. And so it depends on, you know, what the family view is in terms of education. Some of them might think that culture is more important than academic learning. Depends.
Yeah, and I suppose you're always trying to reach that balance as well, aren't you, at the school, of culture and academic learning?
We always talk about the importance of academic learning, because that's how we succeed in, you know, that's how we get a job, how we get, you know, houses and all the rest of it. And I think until the girls understand that, you know, that being on a basics card, being on the dole is not our, you know, way that we want to see them go. So we try and encourage them, but to always hold on to their language, to their customs, be proud of who they are. And you can do both. You can do both. It's not one or the other.
Yes, yeah. Well, and that's the whole point of the school, isn't it? To get that pathway between the two.
Yes.
As you said, one of the questions was whether you cover the cost of them coming from their home communities, which I assume you would have to, would you? How do they get to you? Do you pay for their airfares?
No, that's what the approval process is. I talked about AB study before. So that covers their travel. And we have to make sure that they're approved for AB study before we accept them into the school. So as I said before, the enrolment process can be quite lengthy, but that covers their airfare, their tuition, their board, and backwards and forwards at the end of term.
Right. Okay. So it's fairly extensive.
Yeah.
And one of the questions was, is there a plan for additional Warrawa-style schools, especially for boys?
Well, it's interesting because we started out as a co-ed school in 1983 when the school was first established. And in 2010, we became an all-girls school. I have no intention of trying to start any other schools at this time. And things have changed dramatically. You know, from if you want to register a school now, you have to have 5 years of your business plan and everything in advance. So no, I don't have any plans.
Just along those lines, one of the questions is, do you arrange social activities with boys from other schools? And if so, what school?
Yep, we do. We have some partnerships with local schools, and the Pathways to Womanhood program that I mentioned earlier, that culminates in a major event, and it's one that we've called Debutante Dreaming. So it's like, you know, the girls transitioning from being schoolgirls into, you know, young women. And so the boys partner them at the Deb Ball. We usually have it at a very nice venue in Melbourne. And the families of all of those other students, you know, come along, and they present the girls to elders of the Aboriginal community. But in the lead up to that, they're developing relationships. So we talk about respectful relationships. And for many of these girls, they've never, ever danced with a non-Aboriginal boy, maybe not even an Aboriginal boy. But, it's about giving them those experiences of actually communicating and, socializing with other people. And as I said, for many of them, it's the first time that I remember one girl saying, I never had a white boy put his hand on my shoulder before, as they were learning to dance, So there's so many learnings for everybody, I think.
Yeah. Well, you've answered a lot of this, but one of the questions which you've touched on is, could Dr. Peeler expand on how they teach the student to walk in both worlds? What types of themes and skills do you find important to teach?
Well, I think one of the things, of course, is preparation for the workforce or for higher education, if that's what they choose to do. So in order to be able to walk in both worlds, there are expectations that, the girls have to learn, because many of them will be walking around in basketball shorts and no shoes and going fishing back home in their remote community. You can't obviously do that in the mainstream. So I think it's the Pathways to Womanhood program teaches them that, there are social mores, I suppose, and that also the skills. So we have partnerships with a number of businesses and schools where the girls can go and do work placement. The RACV Club is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had girls, they do the barista training at William Anglis TAFE. So things like that. They've done a work experience with the local primary school. So we very much, and also, at the, we're next to the Hillsville Sanctuary. So the girls go up there and work with the animals, and also do face painting with the young kids that come through there. So there's a lot of interaction in that, and they're learning to have these experiences in mingling and socializing in a broader context than they would in their home community, but still being proud of their Aboriginal identity.
Antonis, we've talked a lot about the girls, and a few people have asked about your staff. Where do your staff come from? And are they all Indigenous as well? They're all Aboriginal?
No, they're not.
Okay.
That's still, something that we're aiming for.
Yeah.
But we require our staff to hold certain certificates, whether it be a youth worker or social worker or whatever. And I think it's about, and they have to have knowledge and understanding of Aboriginal culture and society and so forth. And we give them a lot of professional development and cultural awareness training if they require it. But my thing is, we want the best staff that we can get for our students. It'd be highly desirable if we could have Aboriginal people. Our location is, we're in a beautiful part of the world, but we're outside of Melbourne. And so there's a lot of factors that come into thinking. I do have Aboriginal staff, but not everybody is Aboriginal.
Right. And do you get support from Victorian Aboriginal communities in terms of wanting to help or wanting to teach or share their stories?
I'm very involved in Aboriginal community work in a range of things. And so my job is to make our local community aware of Warrawa Aboriginal College and what our aims and objectives are. And we often bring them, the other community organisations out here to take them through things like our Dreaming Trail and our history, because there's nothing like it anywhere else in Melbourne or in Victoria. In fact, it's quite a different experience. And for us as Aboriginal people, that's what we want. We want to hold on to our history and our culture and to tell that story.
Yeah. And what are your dreams for these girls when they graduate?
Well, the dreams for the girls come from the families, not from me. So, you know, they tell us, we have a school community forum once a year where the families come in, and then we workshop, you know, what they would like and so forth. And, you know, we're always in close telephone communication with the families. So I think that's really important, and what the girls themselves want. So that's where the personalised learning plans come in. But my personal hope is that we give them the skills and the ability and the confidence to do what they wish to do, and to support them to do that.
Yeah, well, it's probably the absolute best that you can do for them, isn't it? I've had many questions saying, what can we do to contribute? How can we help you? I'm going to suggest perhaps that people contact us in the first instance, Abercrombie and Kent, through our website, and then, Auntie Lois, we can speak with you and sort of work out the best way to do this. Are there particular things that you're looking for? I mean, I'm sure with a project like this, you are looking for funding or assistance in terms of funding. Would that be something that would be useful to you?
Yes, indeed, because of particularly at this time with the COVID, we've taken a financial hit because of our enrolment, and it's all based on enrolment. There's that, but there's other things to broaden the experience for the girls. Like one of the things is the development of the music and the Media Arts Centre. That's something that we're very keen to do. But you know, I'm really happy to just talk about our history and our culture. And yes, if there's any questions, I'd ask them to go through you, please.
Okay. We've got a couple of minutes left. So one of the questions that's just come in is, given the success of the schools model, what are your thoughts on the viability of the Australian government taking it mainstream as an arm of the established education system?
Taking this school
the model, yes.
I think, okay, I've talked about self-determination. So our school is based on Aboriginal leadership, Aboriginal knowledge, Aboriginal ways of knowing, doing and being, and our history and all that goes with that. I don't think it's something that you can just pick up and replicate unless it's from the same model. Now, I have to say that when the school first started back in 1983, there was always this idea of replicating it elsewhere. But now I think we're talking about hubs. You know, if someone wants to, you know, particularly with the experience we've had with COVID, there might be the opportunity to have a hub somewhere that embraces the Warrawa values, the pillars on which we've built our program. And it's got to have that wraparound support for students. And sometimes that's better not being at home to actually for them to be away. And this is what many of the girls themselves acknowledge, and their families. So I'm quite happy being in the Yarra Valley.
And just finally, tell me, you have a wide range of interests beyond education. Just from that very brief introduction that I gave, you have participated in so many different facets of Indigenous culture and life. What other areas, perhaps you could give us a sort of summary of what other areas of Aboriginal affairs you're involved in?
Yes, well, I chair the Department of Justice Regional Aboriginal Justice Advisory Committee for the Eastern region. I'm on the Aboriginal Justice Forum, and I chair the Indigenous Prison Visitors Program.
Right.
The thing about that, my interest in that, is the intergenerational trauma that our people experience even today from the times of settlement, and I alluded to some of that earlier, that people couldn't go to school beyond the 3rd grade. Our children were removed and put into homes where they went out to service, and this is something that every family experienced. So we've got this intergenerational thing that's about our social and emotional well-being. And the rate of incarceration of our people is escalating every day. And I want to, for me, my personal interest in this is ensuring that their social and emotional and cultural well-being is being addressed, their needs is being addressed in what is largely a mainstream, institution with non-Aboriginal people who don't understand what the issues are and the underlying issues. So again, it's education. I'm educating them about what these things are and what we would like to see. And it's about self-determination as well, because these are things that we want to make changes for. So we work with government to bring about change.
Right. And do you find government is increasingly receptive?
In this state, they are.
Right.
I'd say Victoria is leading the way in self-determination, and we're even talking about a treaty with Victorian First Nations people, and the Department of Justice that I mentioned, that I work with very heavily, is they've got what we call place-based projects and co-design and all of this. So they're listening. They're listening to Aboriginal people, and so I'm very pleased about that. We've still got a long way to go, but we're making some difference.
Well, I think we're fortunate indeed to have people like you who really work with their passion. Thank you so much, Auntie Lois. It's been an amazing evening. You've shared so much of your vision and your heritage with us, and it's absolutely inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank all of you for joining. If you'd like more information on the experience that you saw in that video, if you'd like more information on Warrawa Aboriginal Girls College, please do contact Abercrombie in Kent through our website, email us, telephone us. We're online. Thank you all very much. Good night.